Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, jobs, changing careers. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy, thy will be done. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes in this session on talking about video interviews, Skype interviews, Teams interviews, Google Meet interviews, anything over video. This is becoming a real problem and a real challenge for a lot of people. The interviewing, since the pandemic, the interviewing process has changed a little bit, and you need to be aware of it. 35 to 40% of the time, people that are using this kind of technology in an interview are messing it up. So I wanted to go over some of the things that you need to be aware of when you go to do a video interview of any sort. Google, Skype, Teams, Zoom, anything. First of all, you got to make sure if you're a candidate, it doesn't hurt if you're an employer too, to make sure your technology works. I interviewed a lady yesterday over a video, and her speech was the sound was 2 steps behind her speech. It sounded awful, and it was terribly distracting. You've got to make sure that you look at the camera. If you're using a PC and it has a camera, do not look at the screen of the person that you were interviewing with. Look at the camera. I had a fellow one time that put a picture of his kids and his wife on the top of his PC so that he could be looking into the camera. It's terribly distracting when somebody is not looking at you in the camera. Do not use things like FaceTime, your phone. I had a candidate not too long ago that couldn't get into one of the rooms in her office where she was going to give a Zoom interview. So she went to her car and she did it on FaceTime. It was terrible, and it moved around. It was just absolutely awful. Got to make sure your technology works really, really well. You got to practice this stuff. Make sure your lighting is correct. The lighting on your video should be in front of you and be on your face, not above you or behind you, because it makes you look dark. Make sure the light is correct. If you've got a bald head like I do, mostly put makeup on the top of your head so that it doesn't look shiny. That kind of thing is distracting. If you have a headset, use the microphone on the headset as I'm doing, because the microphone on your computer picks up all kinds of extemporaneous noise, and it can become very distracting. Where you do it is really important. Don't do it at a Starbucks. Don't do it in your car. Don't do it at a makeshift place that you just kind of threw it together and you kind of showed up. Background, for some reason, background becomes really important in these kind of interviews. People notice more about your background than you would ever imagine. I had a candidate that got eliminated because he had comic books on his bookshelf. Uh, Bookshelves with a whole bunch of books on them doesn't people start looking at what kind of books you got on your bookshelf, pictures on your bookshelf, things like that don't work very well. Try to have some kind of pastel coloring in your background, maybe a picture like I have, but beyond that, do not let your background become a distraction to the interview. What you're wearing, dress in a coat and a tie. I had a candidate that took an interview with the president of a company. He was wearing a muscle shirt. At least that's what the president said he was. These things can become way too casual. So make sure your background is pleasant but not distracting. I had one candidate who did an interview in her bedroom, and her bed was in the background, and it was a big 4-poster bed according to the employer, and it was very distracting. and he thought it was just too intimate. He did not like it, and he thought it was not good. She also wore great big earrings that reflected all kinds of light, and the earrings were very distracting. So you've got to be aware of your surroundings and where you're doing it from and a professional environment. You got to practice this stuff. Practice, practice, practice. It doesn't come naturally. The length of time, not likely. A lot of times, my employers schedule 30 minutes. It never seems to be enough. They get about halfway through the interview and then it stops. I would I would try to get a hiring authority to interview you for an hour, and if you go less than that, then that's fine. There seems to be a point at which you get to be about 45 minutes where psychologically that's the end of the interview. Make sure you have your resume in front of you, water in front of you, a glass of water in front of you. Make sure people know that you're doing an interview and shut your door so that the kids won't be yelling. I had a lady the other day I interviewed, her cat walked across the interview camera while she and I were talking. Okay with me, but not to a prospective employer. So let people know. You got to practice this stuff. The job search solution program that we have available goes into a lot of detail on these video interviews, but you've got to be really careful and you got to really practice this stuff. 35% of the time, a candidate is eliminated in a video interview, not because of what they say, but because of the environment and the situation they're involved in. So think about this, practice it, make sure you do it right. This is Tony Bashara with the Job Search Solution.